morning with two guys, just go to the supermarket and do their own shopping. It's just so that it's kind of like a treasure hunt. Keeps them on the toes and makes the day a little more interesting. This way.
Yeah, I know. Better like make sure.
Just goes around like.
Hola, buenas tardes. Bienvenidos a una nueva rueda de prensa de las películas que forman este año parte de la sección oficial a concurso. En esta ocasión vamos a presentar Unfalling, que es la nueva película de Laura CARREIRA y el primer largometraje. Os voy a presentar por orden de mesa a parte del equipo que nos acompaña hoy. Desde el otro extremo hasta aquí están Mario productor de la película, JOANA SANTOS, actriz protagonista, Laura CARREIRA, directora, y el productor Jack Thomas O'Brien. Si os parece, abrimos turno de preguntas y si no aparece preguntas, pues yo abro un poco el turno. No sé si alguien quiere preguntar algo. ¿No? Bueno, pues yo quería, para empezar y abrir un poco fuego, quería preguntarle a Laura sobre un poco el origen de la película. Al ver la película uno siente que está ante... No sé si funciona bien.
Yeah.
Uno siente que está ante una película muy vivida, ¿no? La sensación de que hay algo autobiográfico de alguna manera en la película, ¿no? Entonces quería preguntarte hasta qué punto eso es así.
Yeah, I think it's a combination, but it definitely comes from the first years of living in Scotland as a migrant. I think it's a very specific feeling, and at the time, it felt like it was important to tell. It also coincided with the same time that I got my first job. So I moved to Scotland when I was 18, got my first job, and I think that entire experience was quite shocking. And then I think I looked, you know, at the future, and it seemed a little scarier, I think, than it had up until that point. So that feeling was definitely the influence. But then also I did a lot of interviews with pickers, so people who do the same job that Aurora does. And those conversations influenced the film a lot. And it kind of, I think, a lot of the details that I ended up writing in the script came from those conversations, for sure, yeah. Thank you.
¿Hay alguna pregunta? Vale, aquí hay una adelante.
Yeah, I actually live in Edinburgh, and I'm quite interested in the fact that this is a very anonymous kind of view of Scotland. It's quite unusual to see that on film, actually. You know, nearly always directors go in for, you know, showing the monument in Edinburgh or whatever. I mean, I know part of it looked as though it was shot in Princes Street Gardens, but you would only know that if you live there like I do. And I just wondered about that, keeping the whole thing anonymous and, you know, having various Scottish accents as well that are across the piece, because it was obviously a deliberate choice.
Yeah, I mean, it felt important because I think I noticed how diverse Scotland was. In terms of the city, I think it has to do with the character. I think this is a character that lives so much between the flat and the warehouse that it almost felt important to feel her disconnection with the city. So the only time that we see her in the city is when she goes for her job interview, one of the kind of key moments where we actually gather a little bit more information about Edinburgh. And I think it was to have that sense of separation from the other world, for sure. Yeah.
No sé si hay alguna pregunta. Yo creo que uno de los puntos fuertes de la película, o una de las razones por las que la película al comité de selección nos interesó mucho, y creo que es una pregunta que podéis responder todos, es por el equilibrio que hay entre mostrar una realidad sin juzgarla y al mismo tiempo sin ser compasivo con la protagonista, ¿no? Creo que hay una mezcla muy interesante de mantener ese equilibrio entre no juzgarla por nada de lo que hace, ni a ella ni al resto de los personajes, y tampoco compadecerse de ella. Hay una empatía hacia ella porque evidentemente se abordan asuntos muy complejos, ¿no? Como la precariedad, bueno, esta sociedad capitalista que arrasa con todo, de alguna manera incluso la enfermedad mental, ¿no? Podemos decir que también está ahí, pero nunca hay una mirada compasiva hacia ese personaje, que es algo como del buen cine social, y quería un poco preguntaros sobre esto, cómo trabajasteis ya desde el texto, pero luego también desde cada una de vuestras facetas, y lo hago extensible incluso a la protagonista, ¿no?
Should I start? Yeah. I think for me it was really important that we didn't lose the sense of kindness around her. And you're right, I think sometimes films can be overly dark, but they blame what is happening around the character and the characters that, you know, are around her. And that to me was really important not to do. Because I think, you know, you can experience the full force of capitalism and have people around you and they will help you, but that might not be enough. And that to me was really important. Even with the flatmates, you know, there are people that they're there for as much as they can, and the colleagues the same, but actually the way they are living doesn't really provide enough time for them to get to know each other and to care for each other. And I think a lot of the problems stem from that. But yeah, I had a real sense of, you know, I don't want Aurora to have anyone that she can point the finger at and say, it's them. You know, even managers, which I think is quite an easy, you know, they're an easy target. But, you know, even managers, they are doing their job. And that was something from a lot of the interviews I did, people would say that over and over again. You know, it's kind of not their fault. There was almost that compassion even for the people around them, you know, in the job. So yeah, for sure, yeah.
Bueno, yo quería preguntarle a JOANA sobre desde dónde abordar este personaje al que un poco conocemos desde dos ámbitos, desde la rutina, ¿no? Este trabajo rutinario del día a día, de ir pasando el aparato para marcar los productos, y desde el silencio, ¿no? En un principio, aunque luego empiece como a establecer vínculos, ¿no? Más frágiles o menos con su entorno laboral y con sus compañeros de piso, pero es un poco un personaje planteado desde el silencio, ¿no? Desde alguien que está empezando a encontrar su lugar, ¿no? Entonces quería preguntarte un poco cómo preparaste ese personaje y también cómo lo trabajaste. A mí hay una cosa que me gusta mucho, que es el trabajo corporal, más allá de todo lo que tiene que ver con el texto, esta forma de la protagonista de encajar en ese almacén, de sentirse incómoda en su propia piel de alguna forma, ¿no? Y quería preguntarte un poco cómo fue ese trabajo, tanto más solitario como con la directora, para un pouco entender al personaje e entrar aí.
Eu soube em agosto que ia fazer esta personagem e pronto, e aí, a partir daí comecei a tentar também absorver mais o texto, mas em meados de outubro, início de outubro, foi quando me mudei para a Escócia durante 2 meses, e acho que aí é que comecei realmente a aprofundar a personagem, porque eu própria vi-me a viver sozinha na Escócia, num apartamento. Neste caso não tinha roommates, mas consegui se calhar absorver esse silêncio que era realmente preciso para esta personagem. E dei por mim também a fazer as mesmas coisas que a personagem. A chegar a casa, pôr a roupa para lavar. Pronto, como um mortal faz, mas fazia exatamente os mesmos passos da Aurora. Contudo, acho-me um bocadinho mais extrovertida que ela. somos muito diferentes, mas... E depois também tive os ensaios com a Laura e com os restantes atores, e isso também nos ajudou muito a encontrar a própria maneira de falar da Aurora, se calhar também sujar um bocadinho mais o texto. Se calhar o inglês da Aurora não era, pronto, não podia ser perfeito, e pronto, e encontrar empatia também com os outros personagens.
Muchas gracias. No sé si alguien quiere una pregunta.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Soy Marcela, del Diario Vasco. Me ha gustado mucho que, por ejemplo, las personas del sur, como la española que ha salido ahí gritando en la cocina, ¿no? Aurora, que es de Portugal, supuestamente las personas del sur son más cálidas, ¿no? Y vemos que Aurora es muy fría. Entonces, claro, los polacos eran los que estaban más animados. ¿Puedes contarnos algo de ese intercambio cultural y de esos estereotipos?
I mean, I must admit, I don't know if I agree, but I don't know if I thought of, I guess, you know, there was a lot of people, I guess from that time as well, when I was living the first years in Edinburgh, that I met a lot of characters that then I thought, I think, you know, there'll be things that end up in a film that I make. But, you know, they influence, for example, Vera as well. You know, like I had a colleague in my first job that kept saying that she wanted a job in an office because she wanted to sit. And she kept repeating it over and over. And that then ended up in the dialogue in the film. But yeah, I don't know if I was entirely aware that we had shifted the stereotypes in terms of the nationalities.
¿Que sientes que no hay estereotipos? Ah, vale. Vale.
Ah, yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah, so, yeah, that's good. I think it's because, you know, when you meet a lot of people from different nationalities, you realize that, yeah, everyone is different, really, and your background doesn't really define you, and, you know, you can present very differently, yeah.
Can I add
Sure.
something? It was really interesting piecing together quite a large cast, many of whom only appear once in the film, from a huge amount of different nationalities, all of whom basically came from Edinburgh and Glasgow. And it was interesting in the prep process as we were casting, seeing how they would all fit together, whether they were in the warehouse or in the flat, and the diversity of different cultures or ethnicities, or I feel like we did a good job of balancing those things, and it's representative of those places. So in a way, the stereotyping wasn't thought about too much, it just sort of happened naturally. You know, those characters come from that place, and that's how they are, so.
Yeah, and even in the work with the characters, I think, especially during rehearsals, we allowed for a lot of, you know, changes in the script at points that if, you know, the text that I had written for a character didn't seem right, the actors or the non-professional actor that was playing it would be given the freedom to adapt, you know, according, you know, using words that maybe they would use, etc. So I think that might have also helped with that.
¿Hay alguna otra pregunta? ¿No? Hay una conversación que un poco está desde la crítica y también desde el periodismo, que hay un poco la sensación de que últimamente parte importante del cine que se hace es un cine como muy de tesis, en el que todo se cuenta como en primer plano, ¿no? Y todo se verbaliza y todo se explica. Y creo que Unfolding un poco toma la senda contraria, ¿no? En la que, como comentaba antes, se abordan cuestiones muy profundas, pero se le da al espectador el espacio para llegar a ellas, ¿no? Y para sacar sus propias conclusiones. Creo que eso habla de un guión muy preciso y muy precioso también, ¿no? Para saber contar todo eso desde lo mínimo, pero creo que también es algo que tienes que reforzar desde dirección, ¿no? Entonces te quería preguntar, Laura, un poco si estás de acuerdo con esa cosa, ¿no? De que este cine está un poco secuestrado por el tema y por la explicación y por la argumentación, y los personajes suelen hablar muchísimo, y creo que Unfolding va un poco a contracorriente en este sentido, y creo que es una de las grandes virtudes de la película.
Obrigada. I think it was a little bit the process of writing. At points, I think we doubted. You know, it's my first film, so I had no way of proving that this was going to work on the script, other than, you know, going and filming and seeing if it did work. And I think at points there was a doubt if people would understand even some of the themes, or if it would just feel like, you know, we're just seeing her work and we're seeing her doing her day-to-day and we're not really entirely in her head. And I think a lot comes from also JOANA's performance, because I think, you know, she says so much without me having to have written it. But yeah, I really like this sort of cinema where you're discovering and you're allowed to exist within the film as well, you know, and you're allowed to think through. And that to me was definitely important. But I guess there's a balance, because at the end of the day, I knew I was making a film that was going to be someone, you know, that was very defined by work, and that was, you know, looking for purpose and definition through that. So in a way, I knew I wanted to explore that. And I also wanted to, you know, look at the financial vulnerability that she's experiencing. But I do think it was through the writing and through all the research that all these different themes started popping up. And I think at that point I realized, okay, this isn't just going to be a film about, you know, how bad the job is or how easy someone can, you know, struggle financially with just one unexpected bill. I think this film can be more existential than that, because I think it is about, you know, what the human cost to living this way is. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No sé si hay alguna pregunta. Aquí delante una y luego el compañero.
Hola, Alba de Contracultural. Como millennial me siento súper interpelada porque la verdad es que remueve la película y, bueno, enhorabuena. Quería preguntar, o sea, me ha llamado mucho la atención esta forma de tratar de manera estructural todos estos temas, que es el hipercapitalismo, la alienación de los trabajadores, ¿no? Desde un punto de vista más holístico. Y quería preguntar cuál es el papel del smartphone en la película, que sale recurrentemente, ¿no?
Do smartphone.
Smartphone.
Telemóvel.
Yeah, I think one comes from like observing and looking around and seeing everyone on their phones. So that felt important. And I think for Aurora, it becomes a sort of, it's kind of her best friend, really. You know, it's the thing that represents also all these worlds that she could be part of and that, you know, are right there, but she really isn't. And it's quite poppy and flashy, so we worked a lot on like sound design to make that connection with what she's looking at the phone. And at the same time, there's that paradox of like the phone is also something that is actually more and more making you socially more kind of, you know, struggling to connect with other people. So it kind of works as this tool that is a support, but at the same time, it also causes issues with then connecting with others around. And it's not just her. I think a lot of people in the film, we were like, I think whenever we were in rehearsals, we were like, grab your phone. Whenever you don't know what you want to say or do, like, hold on to your phone, because it's kind of what we do, I think, with our days. Yeah.
Gracias. Hay una pregunta aquí.
Sí, mi pregunta va a ser un poco una ampliación de la que ha hecho la compañera. Yo quería me gustaría que hablaras del final, no sé si de la última secuencia, que yo personalmente he agradecido porque me parece que aporta un poco de luz a toda la historia. Ha habido un momento que pensaba, Dios mío, va a acabar en el parque ahí tirada, no. Menos mal que había. Y entonces, bueno, quería saber si esa secuencia siempre estuvo en el guión, cómo la trabajasteis y un poco cuál es esa luz que hay al final, cómo la trabajasteis. Gracias.
So I found it really hard to write the ending for the film. And it's because I knew I didn't want it to remove hope from the film, but I also didn't want to be, you know, unrealistic. You know, she would go back to work until she could find a way out of there. But that felt quite dark, and I didn't want it to end there. And I struggled. I wrote several different endings. It went on for a while. And I kept thinking, no, there must be something, because I really, you know, I do truly believe that, you know, there is hope, but it's very hard to like get it into a scene. And around that time, a lot of the pickers I was speaking to within this week started getting in touch, and they were like, oh, this incredible thing happened. There were some outages in our warehouses, and for the first time, we actually got to know our colleagues. We played games. Someone told me I found out the name for the first time of one of the colleagues, and they talked about how humanizing that moment had been. And, you know, we're talking about, you know, a morning where, you know, there was an outage and they couldn't work. And I thought that could be it, because it's temporary, but it just shows the glimpse of, you know, what could be if we stop working and, you know, the possibilities of what could be created from there. And that excites me a lot. So I wanted to, leave the film with that sort of, glimpse of what could be.
No sé si hay alguna pregunta. Si no hay una pregunta, yo quería preguntarte, Laura, por cuestiones de dirección. Onfolín tiene esta virtud de que todo es tan realista que parece que la cámara no está, ¿no? Y tienes la sensación de que todo fluye con mucha naturalidad, pero si la observas con ojos de los que tenemos todos los que estamos aquí, que estamos habituados a ver cine, vemos que es una película extremadamente bien dirigida, ¿no? A nivel de planificación, a nivel de dónde ponemos la cámara en cada momento, cómo coreografiar a los personajes en escena. Quería preguntarte un poco a nivel de dirección, si siempre tuviste claro que esta era la manera de contarla y también ampliarlo un poco, por si os apetece también participar, a los productores referentes, ¿no? A mí me conectaba un poco con el buen cine social británico, pensé evidentemente en las primeras películas de Ken Loach, por ejemplo, y quería preguntarte un poco cuál es tu escuela, cuál es vuestra escuela y es un poco desde dónde te planteaste la dirección, si siempre tuviste claro que ese era el camino.
Yeah, I think even from the moment I was writing the script, I knew that I had this feeling that feeling lonely has a very particular sensorial experience. And I think it's more heightened. It's like, you feel your loneliness a lot harder than maybe other people are perceiving it. And it felt like a camera was such a great device to do that, because I think it added this element of feeling observed. And then obviously for the character of Aurora, there's also the money issue that she's trying to conceal. So we tried to work with the camera in a way that would allow us to kind of have these glimpses into what her financial situation is as well, for example, because she doesn't ask for help. So the only way to really try and communicate what she was going through was really through the camera. And then we made some choices, like so Aurora, usually the walls behind Aurora are closer to her, so there's less depth behind her, and I think it talks of that sense of like claustrophobia. And the other characters, they have slightly more space, and I think it talks of that sense of perspective. The camera is filming what it feels like the perspective of the character. And then, of course, the Carl Curtin, our DOP, when we both met, we loved the cinema of the Dardennes and Ken Loach, and so their camera work really kind of influenced our shorts, and I think it sort of influenced the way we worked since. And it was also a practical side. There was also a practical side to our choices because of our limited days. We don't have endless days to shoot it. What allows us was, to have usually one shot, and we try and get that shot, especially the shots where it's just Aurora. We try and do takes of that shot until we get it, and that means we don't do a lot of coverage, but we have to be really secure that that shot is the one we have. Like even LA, our editor, would sometimes be a bit like, "Oh, you didn't do coverage here, did you?" And I was a bit like, "Okay, maybe I was a little hardcore there. Maybe next time."
I would like to add to that, where myself and all the exec producers on the film, the British exec producers, were quite terrified by Laura's confidence that she could get entire scenes in a single setup. But she absolutely did consistently, even though we'd go to 30 takes, she was like, "This is what we're doing," and she was so confident, and it was incredible to watch because, from day one, there was a strong sense of a visual identity to the film, a technical approach that everyone felt confident about from the beginning. Yeah.
No sé si alguien quiere preguntar. Bueno, yo un poco también para que participara esto desde la conversación, quería preguntaros a Mario y a Jack. Laura es verdad que es una ópera prima, pero ya viene de cortometrajes muy potentes, muy premiados, muy buenos, con lo que no es un debut, pero es un debut en el largo, es decir, ella ya era una autora conocida y en el circuito de festivales muy respetada, y cuando llega un Falling era un nombre que todos teníamos como una voz interesante que había que seguir, pero es una realidad que cada vez es más difícil producir películas como un Falling, ¿no? Al menos es un poco mi sensación, tal y como está la industria ahora. Entonces os quería preguntar, más allá de la certeza de que de Laura solo podía venir una película interesante, ¿qué había, ¿no?, en este proyecto para que en un momento en el que es tan difícil tirar adelante con películas personales y con visiones únicas de las cosas y con misterio de alguna manera, decidierais apostar por esta película?
Want to go first, Jack?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say in a way it wasn't that difficult. It felt almost, I mean, Mario actually was working with Laura for a little bit before I came across her, and there was already a really strong draft of the script when I first read it, but it felt like a perfect fit for what we were doing at 16 Films. You know, we make Ken Loach's films, we make political films. We're looking for new directors who want to make their films in their own way, but have a strong identity. And I read Laura's script, and it was just beautiful. And then the process began, and obviously developing and then raising the money takes a while. But we had great support from, well, Bro Cinema and the ICA fund in Portugal, but BBC Films and the BFI and Screen Scotland. I would also add, you know, it's a co-production. It's an international co-production, which massively helped bring the whole thing together, because the first piece of money was Portugal. The second piece of money was Scotland, and that's a regional fund. And, you know, it's ridiculous that we're not in the European Union anymore, but we can still do that. And that's a great thing that people often forget. So yeah, I mean, I'd say that.
Thank you.
I'm going to answer in Portuguese. So the first time sorry. Primeira vez que entramos em contato com o trabalho da Laura foi com a sua primeira curta. E quando, no fundo, falámos com a Laura para saber se tinha desenvolvido algum projeto que pudesse ser uma longa-metragem, surgiu então este projeto. E eu acho que é sempre importante pensarmos que é preciso apostar no desenvolvimento das realizadoras, dos realizadores e dos projetos. Os projetos não nascem feitos, os projetos vão-se fazendo. Tal como o Jack estava a dizer, quer dizer, é passo a passo até conseguirmos ter todas as condições para que isso possa acontecer. Mas eu acho que foi isso, desde o primeiro momento que sentimos a firmeza com que a Laura descrevia aquilo que queria fazer e o próprio primeiro draft e a forma como ela desenvolveu depois o guião foi impressionante para nós, ou seja, mostrava muita maturidade e também muita vontade de querer fazer algo que marcasse e que trouxesse uma reflexão. E, portanto, acho que isto foi tudo um casamento perfeito, que ainda pelo meio apanhámos a pandemia e permitiu-nos também refletir sobre uma série de assuntos nas vidas de cada um. E a Laura, não é, tipo, estando a escrever, com certeza lhe tocou pessoalmente, de pensar a sociedade em que vivemos de uma outra forma. E portanto, esta parceria entre UK, Portugal e um talento que mistura, no fundo, tantas nacionalidades juntas, acho que é um bom exemplo para aquilo que poderia ser desenvolvido mais no cinema europeu e no cinema mundial.
No sé si alguien quiere hacer alguna pregunta. Bueno, yo un poco, para acabar la rueda de prensa, un poco en referencia a lo que, cuando hablaba Jack de la productora, como una productora comprometida con un cine político, ¿no? Yo quería preguntaros si de alguna forma ha cambiado, desde los que estamos en el lado de la programación, la crítica o el periodismo, poner el foco en lo político, la dimensión política de las películas se ha vuelto muy importante, ¿no? Es algo que buscamos, ¿no? Porque en un momento tan complicado como este, es como que lo perseguimos un poco, ¿no? Sentimos que el cine de alguna manera, no siempre, pero que sí que tiene que ser un poco testimonio de una época y de lo que está pasando. Quería preguntaros si a vosotros desde el otro lado, ¿no? A la hora de hacer cine, tenéis esa sensación también, ¿no? De que estamos en un momento en el que ese compromiso todavía tiene que ser mayor de lo que ha sido en otra época, o simplemente, como lo llevamos ya interiorizado, sale de una forma espontánea, ¿no? Tanto cuando escribimos un guión como cuando decidimos meternos en la producción de una película. Entonces quería un poco preguntaros cómo os posicionáis en relación a eso, ¿no? A ese compromiso desde el cine, ¿no? Sobre todo porque se trata de una película que es cine social, ¿no? Quería comentar eso.
I think, to me, it always felt like it came naturally. Because I think to a degree, you know, all films are political. It just depends if they're aware of, you know, what they're saying or not. You know, I think if you choose to portray characters and you don't really show them at work, that's a political choice. And so, you know, when you choose to create a portrait of the world that we live in, I think there's a responsibility in that. And I think that's a responsibility that I take seriously. And I think there's a lot of there's a lot of films out there that did that, and you know, and then there's also a lot of films that avoid going into it. But you know, that is also a political choice on them. Yeah.
Thank you. Bueno, no sé si queréis añadir algo a alguien o no.
Acho que há só uma coisa que eu acho que é importante, concordo com o que a Laura disse, mas acho que há falta de tentarmos perceber que sermos humanos, ou seja, a humanidade tem que estar acima de tudo na questão de nos colocarmos politicamente. Primeiro, somos humanos, então de alguma forma, qualquer filme que nos faça refletir sobre a nossa humanidade, estejamos a ir pelo caminho certo, errado, é muito importante. E, portanto, este tipo de reflexões, sim, levam a posicionamentos políticos, mas levam, sobretudo, também a refletirmos sobre a humanidade, sobre o ponto onde nós estamos e também para onde queremos caminhar. Tentar criar um cinema que abra portas para nós conseguirmos refletir e trazer mudanças para a nossa própria sociedade.
Pues muchísimas gracias. Muchas gracias a todo el equipo de Unfolding por acompañarnos. Muchísima suerte con vuestra película y bueno, nos vemos en breve seguro. Gracias.
Gracias.